So, let's start. We heard yesterday at many sessions, in fact, that the underrepresented groups are very important in the just transition process. And before we discuss this, I will have to give you some householding rules for the password for internet, for network, and for the interpretation. We have, as you see, Wi-Fi here, so you can use it for connecting for the Interactio. That's our interpretation tool. There is a code in the room, and for the audience joining online, you can also use the barcode if you wish. So please install it before we start in case there are any questions from the audience, and you can also ask them in your native language. This being said, I think we can move on and discuss the content. So we heard yesterday at many sessions that the vulnerable groups are key in the process of just transition, and it's key to involve them. If we talk about climate neutrality and sustainable future, we mean leaving no one behind, but at the same time, we must acknowledge that there are some people, some groups of people that are hit even harder in the process towards climate neutrality. Moving away from fossil fuels will require reskilling and upskilling of workforce, and building also the resilience of the communities that support them. It has significant impact not only on workers, but also on families and households, and actually on the whole ecosystem around the mines, around the fossil fuel economy. So to reduce these inequalities, the JTF regions need to address these challenges, and they need to offer more flexible workplace practices and also working hours and chances for education. And at the session today, we will discuss what are the barriers for the underrepresented groups, for instance, elderly people, women, youth, but also how to empower them and how they could engage into this process, and how to provide these equal opportunities for them in all green sectors. So we will look at different aspects of ensuring just transition for all. We will look at opportunities in the context of just transition, like, for instance, access to labor market and education, impact on energy poverty, impact of energy poverty, and improvement of stakeholders' engagement for these vulnerable groups. We will reflect on these challenges and also potential solutions to ensure a fair transition for all. And you, the audience, here in the room and also online, you are part of this session, so you are very warm welcome and encouraged to ask questions to the speakers, but also to share your experience or your concerns. This is the platform, and we are here to exchange. I coordinate the activities of the Just Transition platform, and I would like also to share with you what we have developed, because I think it's important. There are two toolkits that our experts working for Just Transition platform have developed recently on gender dimension in the Just Transition process and on involving elderly people in Just Transition. These toolkits, they are available on our GTP website. We have looked in these toolkits into different aspects of involving underrepresented groups. We have, for instance, described the strategies in numerous fields like labor, education, health, finance, and cross-cutting involvement in policy making. So please have a look on our website, consult the toolkit. On one of them, we have developed a short video, so as warm-up today before our session, I would like to show you this video on gender dimension of just transition process. And I would like also to thank the European Institute for Gender Equality in Vilnius for helping us and commenting on the toolkit, because we are all together here producing these knowledge products for you, for the stakeholders in the JTF regions. So let's start with the video and continue afterwards with the session.
The Just Transition platform, set up by the European Commission, has developed a range of knowledge products designed to support EU member states, regions, and local actors implementing a just transition. These can be found on the JTP website, with an online library that offers a series of toolkits, catalogues, and case studies. The Toolkit for a Gender-Just Transition offers strategies to support key action areas when addressing the gender-specific challenges of a just transition. In coal and carbon-intensive regions, gender roles are often very traditional, with men's identities being tied to the mine and women often being limited to domestic duties. When implementing just transition plans, authorities should acknowledge the need to redefine the identity of the community as a whole, encouraging community involvement in budgeting decisions, for example, and ensuring all perspectives are fairly represented. Men have a dominant role in the political process. As a result, other people's perspectives are often overlooked and unheard. Funding to grassroots organizations and engaging with community groups and trade unions can help encourage different perspectives and provide a platform for a range of views to be heard. People need to learn new skills as jobs change. Gender stereotyping begins at an early age. One key to this is to change how traditional gender roles are seen. Schools should update their study programs and train teachers so students can freely choose what they want to study without social pressures. In coal and carbon-intensive regions, job options outside the carbon-intensive industry are often scarce. During the transition, women often take on low-paid service sector jobs and experience the double burden of work and care. The just transition is an opportunity to reimagine the economy of a region. Incorporating gender equality measures from the beginning ensures that a diverse talent pool is available. The mining sector has one of the highest pay gaps of any industry. Women are also less likely to access financing available to start and develop a business. Providing access to finance and training for all can help displaced workers reshape their identities and boost productivity. Follow the link on screen to download the full toolkit for a gender-just transition and its many practical examples and resources. Visit the website today and explore the Just Transition Platform Knowledge Repository.
So you are warmly invited to consult our Just Transition Platform webpage. There are plenty of knowledge products on Just Transition and different aspects of this process. And let's start now the session. It will be divided into two parts. First of all, I will invite Veronique Marx, my colleague from DG Regio, team leader on energy poverty and just transition, who will give us a bit of insight into the report on energy poverty and recommendations issued by the Commission on Monday. Afterwards, I will invite our speakers to share their perspectives from different backgrounds. Veronique, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Balbina. I'm in DG Ener, but we are one family. So, good morning, everyone. So throughout the day yesterday, we have heard already about the challenges that the just transition can bring, but more importantly also about the opportunities that the coal phase-out can bring to all of us. Shifting away from coal can be an opportunity to empower the communities, embrace new technologies, redefine the local economic development, and open up new job opportunities. But vulnerable groups, such as low-income households, workers in declining industry, minority groups, also women, elderly people, and people with disabilities, can be disproportionately affected by the transition to a clean economy. They can be less likely to find employment, for example, and experience economic hardship. This is why, in order to achieve a just transition, it is so important to pay particular attention to vulnerable groups and empower them. We need to ensure that they can participate in the decision-making equally to other population groups, and that they can access to the resources and the opportunities needed to protect them from any negative impacts of the transition. The European Commission is determined to leave no one behind in this transition. This is one of the principles enshrined in the Green Deal. Today, I will focus my intervention on one specific population group, which has been particularly impacted in the past 2-3 years, and that's the energy poor. Energy poverty is defined as a situation in which households are unable to access essential energy services and products, thus affecting their health, their living conditions or their living standards, and the level of heating, cooling, and the lighting of their homes. It's a multidimensional phenomenon that occurs when one or several factors related to income, high energy bills, or inefficiency are combined. In the past year, we have seen a significant increase of energy poverty in the EU. Around 9.3% of the EU population, which represents 40 million people, were unable to adequately heat their homes. This was a 2.4 percentage point, representing more than 10 million people difference, increase from 21 to 2022. This increase was largely due to the increase of the energy prices, but also the high living costs fueled by inflation. All countries in the EU are affected by energy poverty, but we have large geographical differences across the EU. That's why it's so important to address energy poverty in the context of the energy transition. We need to make sure that everyone can access essential energy services, have access to clean energy to cover their basic needs, regardless of the income or where they live. People in energy poverty tend to be more dependent on fossil fuels, particularly reliant on coal and gas to heat their homes, and given the lack of resources that they might have, they have no possibilities to invest into energy efficiency or cleaner energy. And they are therefore also less likely to be left behind in the transition and remain dependent on these inefficient resources, and will have to, over time, also bear the disproportionate costs related to them. Over the past years, the EU legal framework on energy poverty has been significantly strengthened. Member States now have an obligation to identify the number of households in energy poverty, establish an objective to reduce this number, and to take the measures to address this. They also have an obligation to report their progress on this, as they do on their contributions to the EU climate and energy objectives targets. With the newly adopted recast Energy Efficiency Directive, we also now have an EU-level definition of energy poverty, which allows to rightly frame the phenomenon across all member states in the EU. The directive also requests that member states prioritize energy poor in their energy efficiency investments, and that member states adopt a policy mix that doesn't have any direct or indirect impacts on energy poor. These strengthened legal obligations are also accompanied by increased financing, public funding for investments for energy poor, through, for example, the Recovery and Resilience Funds, which includes energy poverty as a specific objective. There's cohesion funding, and then also the newly adopted Social Climate Fund, specifically designed to mitigate the impact of the carbon pricing in the building and transport sectors. Moreover, in March this year, the Commission proposed a reform of the electricity market, which aims to make consumer bills less dependent on volatile fossil fuels and enhance the consumer empowerment in many aspects, including through a proposed ban on disconnections of vulnerable customers. To strengthen the efforts on the eradication of energy poverty, the European Commission published this Monday a recommendation and an accompanying staff working document on energy poverty. The guidance explains the legal framework that we now have on energy poverty in the EU, and it provides recommendations to member states on the way they can diagnose energy poverty at national and at local level, and how they can address it structurally. This guidance comes very timely for member states who are now required to update their national energy and climate plans by June next year, so by June 24, and to prepare their social climate plans for 2025, so that they can access the funds from the Social Climate Fund. The recommendation analyzes different measures and actions that can be implemented to ensure energy affordability, but it also underlines the need to prioritize structural measures that address root causes of energy poverty through specifically investments into energy efficiency and access to affordable renewable energy. Structural measures have a long-lasting impact, and they allow households to improve the energy efficiency of their homes and their appliances. Complementary social measures also remain important, particularly in a situation where vulnerable households cannot access these structural measures. But such more social measures should be well targeted to specifically those people or those populations that are in need. The recommendation published by the Commission on Monday also tackles issues such as related to information sharing, to communication, to skills development, both for policymakers, but also for professionals and households, and financing. Given that people in energy poverty usually lack own resources and have limited access to commercial loans, the guidance recommends that public financial support is particularly essential for helping them to finance their investments. So to conclude, empowering vulnerable groups in the energy transition, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. No transition can succeed if it's not supported and implemented by those that are impacted by it. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Veronique. Sit with me here, please, for a moment. In our women's circle, let's discuss energy. I have a question. You spoke about the underrepresented groups, about energy poverty, but here we meet in the context of Just Transition platform, and these are the representatives from the coal and carbon-intensive regions that receive support from the Just Transition Fund. So could you tell us if in any way these regions, coal regions and carbon-intensive regions, if they are particular somehow for the energy poverty aspects and issues?
Thank you, Blabine. So as I mentioned before, we now have, the microphone is fine? I can, okay. Energy poverty is found throughout the EU. All member states are impacted, but there are large geographical differences throughout the EU. While the EU is embarking on the process of the decarbonization, coal and carbon-intensive regions are particularly impacted by the job losses that these communities are or will experience. In addition, particularly in the coal regions, I mentioned this before, but households are largely dependent on the fossil fuels for the heating their homes. They are dependent on coal-fired district heating, for example, or gas-fired district heating. And heating accounts for a largest share of households' expenditure on energy. And it's really often this expenditure that drives low-income households into energy poverty. That's why we believe that that coal and carbon-intensive regions are particularly impacted on energy poverty. And so the communities relying on fossil fuel heating, they risk facing a lack of income, as well as the increasing heating costs, especially in winter, and without the resources to switch to cleaner and cheaper heating systems.
Okay, thank you so much. Questions from the audience to Veronique. You have a chance now to ask about the recommendation, about the report, about the views of the Commission. Here is a question I see from Lydia.
Morning everyone. Thank you for your interesting update on this issue. I was wondering about energy communities, your view on energy communities, because I think that it's a powerful instrument, and I'd like to know your opinion on fostering energy efficiency, but at the same time is also build a community feeling. So I think that maybe the EU should prefer such instruments rather than incentives as such, because through these instruments these communities can feel more communities, and then maybe they can fund other projects via energy efficiency. Thank you.
No, that's correct. I mean, energy communities have an important role to play in tackling energy poverty, but particularly also to allow people to access renewable energy. So energy poverty cannot only be tackled by energy efficiency. Of course, that's an important aspect, but also about allowing access to renewable energy. And especially for energy poor, this is very important. And energy communities is one of the models that can be used to allow this access. But also what we have found is that it's not just, I mean, energy communities have additional benefits, not just allowing access to renewable energy, but also they create a sense of community, and they have a social cohesion role to bring people together and to feel part of something bigger, to raise awareness among these population groups on information sharing related to the energy efficiency and renewable energy.
Thank you, Veronique. Are there any other questions? You are also welcome to put questions in chat online. No questions? Then I think we can close here. Thank you so much, Veronique. Big applause for you. And I will now invite on stage our 3A speakers. There will be Annabelle, Andrea, and Alma. Please welcome. You can sit here, maybe Andrea, Annabelle, and I. Great. So that will be good. Thank you. So we are moving to the second part of our session, where we would like to know some views on equal opportunities for all in just transition context, and how to address the barriers for the underrepresented groups, and what type of solutions there are from different perspectives. So we will hear some perspective from the academia world, from the NGO trade union side, and also from our European Institute for Gender Equality. We will start with Annabelle. You can present yourself shortly, and then please explain us about the Gender Equality Index that you develop and why we actually need it, and what overall is your understanding of equality and equal opportunities for just transition.
Great. Thank you so much, Balbina, and also thank you to DG Regio and to you for the invitation. And also thank Veronique for the interesting presentation before. My name is Annabelle Wildschut. I am I'm a research officer at the European Institute for Gender Equality in Vilnius. And every year we publish the Gender Equality Index, basically scoring the different member states on different aspects of gender equality, such as work, time, money, and a few other domains as well. Every year we have the thematic focus. And this year there was actually the green transition in energy and transport specifically, with, of course, a strong social aspect, so the socially fair transition. We focused broadly on the intersection of gender equality, climate change, but also on the just green transition in energy and transport. For example, looking at women and men as consumers, looking at women and men in decision making, and also with a labor force perspective, and therefore also, of course, looking at education, as that's vital for the labor force and taking advantage of labor opportunities. I won't share everything with you today. I won't talk that long, but I want to take you through some of findings that are interesting for today for the discussion on the just transition. First, let me begin by saying we're talking here about equalities, about vulnerable households and citizens in the green transition. And it's important when we're talking about these issues about energy poverty, about energy efficiency, but also about who gets to take advantage of the green transition and who is maybe more impacted by the green transition and also by the problems that are kind of going hand in hand that we need to solve. We need to be specific about these populations. So we need to ask ourselves who are underrepresented in the labor force in decision making, who might experience the adverse effects of the clean energy transition, but also who are positioned to take advantage of these changes that will happen in the next couple of years and beyond that. And of course, also, how can policymakers on all levels, as we're talking now, of course, here in the context of regions, take these perspectives on board and make the transition just? I would like to briefly share some things about kind of the consumer's perspective and also vulnerabilities to energy poverty, kind of building maybe upon what Veronique has said, and then also briefly discuss a bit about the labor force and education. We see that if we talk about energy consumption and use, we see that income is quite a big predictor. This is often mediated by gender, as women are overrepresented among poor populations. We see that if we look at use, that women tend to engage more in energy curtailing behavior, and there are a few studies pointing towards, of course, women take on a brunt of the domestic work, oftentimes in households, and we see that that women report on performing these duties, but often they have they do this with using maybe a bit less energy than like the mean. Also, we see, based on Eurobarometer 2019, that men tend to engage a bit more in investments in energy efficiency, especially, and it's quite interesting, high costs, such as buying a low-fuel car. And we see also that when it comes to buying household appliances that might be more energy efficient, women report on doing that more often. Also, if we look at energy poverty, and we now have, of course, the common definition, if we see about certain indicators that could point towards energy poverty and towards people maybe more vulnerable to energy poverty, we do see that gender is not the only predictor. We see that relevant aspects of a person's situation is, for example, age, education or attainment, living with a disability, and being born within the EU or not within the EU. We see that lone parents, and mothers even slightly more than fathers, appear more likely based on, for example, if you look at the ability to keep a house adequately warm, arrears on utility bills, and living in a poor quality dwelling. We see that lone mothers are more represented among these indicators, maybe pointing towards them being more vulnerable to being energy poor. So we have these patterns in use, as well as these differentiated groups that might be more at risk to energy poverty. But we also have to, of course, talk about the future, about this change that we need to make in the labor force and in education to make sure that people have these equal opportunities within the just transition. So I'll just briefly say a few words about the labor force. I think we all know by now that women are underrepresented in the labor force in the conventional energy sector. Global data points towards the fact that women are a bit more better represented in the renewable energy sector, so that might be a bit of good news. However, we see also that if you look at STEAM education, women are still also underrepresented there in fields such as engineering, which will be, of course, very important in the years to come. Our colleagues at Cedefop, the skills agency, they have forecasted the green skills needed for this transition to be made, and there's quite a challenge ahead of us, of course. There will be a labor transformation that, of course, will go hand in hand with large societal changes. due to these pre-existing gender equalities, but also inequalities on grounds of other social characteristics, we see that a picture emerges actually of there are groups that will be able to take advantage of these opportunities, and other groups that might be less posed to take advantage of these opportunities. And I think I feel a bit lucky that you played the clip, actually, Balbina, because there were some points that I wanted to say too there, that you see that in the energy sector there is quite still masculine norms maybe on the work floor can pose barriers for women to enter the workforce. But also, and I think that's a very important point, if we're talking about gender equality, we have to talk about care. We have to talk about unpaid care, and the division of care responsibilities, as well as how employers, how the public, how also policymakers take into account work-life balance. And that's quite important. And I will close off by saying this, that it's important to continue research. Sometimes data and evidence is still lacking. Good quantitative data, but also qualitative data, because we're talking about the lived experiences of people. So we need to also have these kind of sense-making exercises. When we talk about EU-wide, but also on a national level, it is important that we have solid indicators that are comparable, that we can use to monitor kind of where the just transition is going, and that can be disaggregated based on sex, gender, but also different aspects that could make a person more vulnerable to societal changes, such as I mentioned, age, educational attainment. However, maybe a bit of a hope or like an action motive. I don't want to say that this should be a reason not to act now, because a lot of, or not to take the research, the evidence that's already there, and use it to inform processes. Because in the past years, we have seen that the knowledge base on social aspects and the just transition with regards to also climate change has grown. We, this year, with the Gender Equality Index, try to contribute to this knowledge base, and of course, other parties have as well. So it's important to, yes, we need more data and more evidence to monitor the just transition. However, we also have things that we can use and it can inform our discussions and our processes. And with that, I think I'll finish and leave it to my co-panelists. Thank you so much. And thank you, Balbina.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Annabelle. And I agree that data are also crucial to measure and to evaluate. And we will also talk about this later. Alma, I think, has a point on that. But before we move to other panelists, I wanted to ask you which results that you identified in the index could perhaps help the regions in just transition to understand how to ensure this process. Do you have any results that you give in the index for the regions that are here?
Yes, thank you so much, Balbina. And I must say, as a disclaimer, we do mostly the research on the EU level and member state level, but I think there are some certain dynamics that could for sure be useful also for regions to take into account. We, for example, have the data on decision making, and here we have the quantitative data on macro level in policy making, but also you can see that there's and that's then we venture more into kind of qualitative evidence, that you can see that on micro level you have on households who's making the decisions about the use of energy, and also who is kind of shouldering the burden of either curtailing energy consumption or choosing what to use, how to use. Also, as I mentioned, if we look at the consumer side of things, we see things about investing in energy efficiency that certain populations do more, and of course we have this breakdown with regards to indicators that speak to energy poverty. So I think what might be distilled from that for regions is to be, and that maybe harks back to the point, I don't want to be sounding like a broken record, but maybe I am. It harks back to the point that we need to know. So regions need to know, and it's quite a task, I would say, that we need to know who are these vulnerable consumers in the place that we are engaging with, like who are we speaking about? Because if you know who you're speaking about, then you can take more targeted action. And of course, if we're talking about decision-making, inclusive decision-making, it's very important. So if there's a consultation meeting, who is in the room, who is speaking about these things? And I think lastly, lastly, and I can't say this enough, this I will repeat, see how care plays into this. Because if you, for example, organize something within your constituents but there are women that have to take care of the kids that have to go bring their kids to school or not, and there's no opportunity for them to attend that meeting, then they won't show up because they have responsibilities. And of course, I'm not saying only women do care work. That's not at all what I'm saying. But we do see this unequal division. So I think those things kind of distilled from also the results of our research could also be relevant for regions.
Thank you. Thank you, Annabelle. Let's move to Andrea, who is our representative from Solidar. Andrea will share with us a bit about the workshop that you organize in Solidar on empowering vulnerable groups in the green economy. So maybe you will share a bit also how we can do it to empower and what are the good practices and examples.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Big thank you to the European Commission for the invitation. Thank you, Balbina. Thank you to all the colleagues from the Just Transition platform. Just a couple of words maybe about Solidar. We are a network of progressive civil society organizations. We have member organizations all over Europe, but we also have partners outside of Europe in other regions of the world. As I said, civil society, but of course we also work a lot with trade unions in Europe and outside of Europe. And what brings all these organizations together is the need and the importance of achieving more just, sustainable, and fair societies. And of course, a just green transition plays a very important role in this mission. So yeah, thank you again for the invitation. Quite fitting indeed for this session, because indeed at the beginning of the year, with some partner organizations, we at Solidar organized a workshop which we titled Empowering Vulnerable Groups in the Green Economy. And this workshop brought together, I think, more than 40 representatives, experts from more than 40 organizations, some think tanks, civil society organizations, businesses as well, of course, as trade union representatives and other stakeholders, representatives from political institutions. And we wanted to, first of all, come together to sort of assess what are the gaps in research, but also in policy making when it comes to empowering vulnerable groups in the green economy, as well as also to really make sure that we identify how relevant actors can, do this, and can empower vulnerable groups. So the report is actually available since yesterday on the website of a coalition that we called European Alliance for a Just Transition that Solidar launched a couple of years ago. So if you want to see the full report, it's around 20 pages. You can go on the website alliancejusttransition.eu. We uploaded it there because a lot of the organizations that are part of this alliance parliaments were involved and participated in the workshop. And in this report, we gathered all the views, or anyway, many of the policy recommendations and points raised by many of the participants. And we're also going to launch it and spread it widely soon, so maybe you'll see the report then also on social media in the next few weeks. But I thought for this session to just share a few of the key takeaways from the workshop without going too much into detail. And of course, you'll see some more concrete measures then in the report. Starting with the first one, which I think is very much in line with what you shared, Annabelle, which is we realized that there needs to be a lot more research and data about, so that we are able to, first of all, identify the vulnerable groups and communities, but also to better understand the needs of vulnerable groups and communities and the factors that cause their vulnerabilities. We started from also the sort of understanding that there's not one common shared definition or understanding of vulnerability in the context of the green transition. So of course we identified some of the broad elements, but there's nothing unless maybe there's something from the Just Transition platform and maybe we're not aware. But it would also be important to have more data and research really to make sure that we have a clear idea of all the factors underlying vulnerability. There's also a need, I think this is not particularly new to anyone, but there's also a need to better understand the skills that are needed for the jobs that are being created or that will be created by the green transition. In which sectors they will be created, at what skill level, and also who is the most suitable entity to provide training, education, reskilling, upskilling for these jobs. And that's why for us it's particularly important, it comes out from the workshop report, to invest in lifelong learning for all, and with a priority for marginalized and underrepresented group. Besides this, we also sort of realized that there's, or we all agreed that there needs to be social support measures that guarantee social inclusion and a decent standard of life for all, regardless of employment. So for us, these include, social protection, strong and well-funded social services, of course, including child and adult care services, access to adequate and energy-efficient housing, measures to tackle energy and transport poverty, electricity market reforms that work for the people, and more. And maybe the last main key takeaway from the workshop, as I said, a bit in more general terms, is the importance of meaningful, and here we're stressing the word meaningful, involvement of vulnerable and underrepresented people in the political discourse, in decision-making, on green policies, on the relevant social measures, and that needs to be guaranteed through concrete measures. A lot of organizations, a lot of stakeholders play a very important role in empowering vulnerable groups in the green economy. Civil society, of course, community organizations, trade union, work integration, social enterprises. So it's very important to understand how these, the role that these play, but also who is best suited to provide such support to vulnerable groups and for what kind of support. And then, of course, also to ensure that the activities of such organizations are supported through adequate funding, as well as, of course, active labor market policies. And maybe just to conclude on this point, in a setting of the European Commission, I cannot not use this opportunity also to say a few words about policies. It came out also from the workshop that it's very important to have targeted policies to support people in vulnerable situations. So also looking at the EU and at the EU policies, many participants, or anyway from the workshop, it came out that the protection and empowerment of people in vulnerable situations really needs to sit at the heart of just transition policies as I said, at EU level, but of course not just, and that policy needs to tackle all dimensions of socioeconomic inequalities, and also, very important, recognize multiple and cumulative vulnerabilities of people. So we are calling, for instance, for an overarching just transition policy framework, which is comprehensive, inclusive of all affected sectors, which has concrete targeted measures to support people in vulnerable situations, of course in the world of work, but also beyond. And this also comes with sufficient, sustainable and long-term funding. So maybe a certain percentage of EU funds could be dedicated specifically to supporting vulnerable groups. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. Plenty of ideas, a lot of work to be done at the EU level and in the regions. You will have in a few minutes chance to ask questions also to Andrea and Annabelle. Let's move and speed up a bit. Let's move to Alma to give us a bit of perspective from the university and also from Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is interesting because maybe we can also learn from regions in this part of Europe.
Thank you, Balbina, for such a nice introduction. Rarely from Bosnia and Herzegovina you can hear in European Union that you can learn from our experiences. Good morning, my name is Alma Midžić. I'm independent researcher and I have, let's say, a long-standing engagement in local CSOs in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in supporting directly citizens in, let's say, in the topics related to protection of environment, participation, combating corruption, and their right to water, access to water. But I will start with let's say, representing main findings of the research that we recently done on the gender-responsive green transition in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We used the framework of Sofia Declaration and 5 pillars to frame our research. And what member of a research team, Damir Miljević, said, transition, it's not only about the energy. And I think we need to keep this in mind. And you will see through some of the recommendations that we proposed within this research. Some of the findings that, and we done a small-scale qualitative research also for the purpose of the study. What citizens told us is that there is lack of central information point. So they don't know even where to start to find information about green transition, energy poverty, incentives, and so on. Also, they don't perceive green transition close to existential and structural problems that they face in daily basis. And they cannot connect it. So I would say this information process needs to be upgraded and it needs to be done fast. Also, there is lack of transparency in the process, and there is the fear that Bosnia and Herzegovina will not be included in the reform on time. But at the end, they see it as a development chance, and they see that this process can be something also for the citizens. And they need to be included in this process. Regarding the decentralization of energy sector, we have energy laws now in both entities, in Federation and Republika Srpska, but we lack of all set of bylaws related to energy communities and cooperatives. And this, I would say, slow legal harmonization is shrinking space for citizens to participate in energy sector, because the grid will be already covered with, let's say, private investors and so on. So we don't know how then to include citizens in this if we don't push this law process bit more. Also, there is fear of corruption. We already faced in Bosnia and Herzegovina a lot of corruption regarding, let's say, green transition transition and this construction of small hydropower plants. There was in plan too many of them, and they didn't contribute so much to the transition. And most of these projects were built or were planned to construct even in communities that still don't have access to water. And they were totally excluded in decision-making processes. This is a lesson that we need to have in mind when we now frame every action regarding the green transition in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Also, sustainable rural development is something that we looked upon in the study, because Bosnia and Herzegovina is by OECD definition rural country, with 61% of the country is rural, and most of the workers in energy sector comes from rural areas. That's why we recommended to push development of the rural areas, especially public infrastructure is something that they miss in these areas. Also, to empower women's position in the process of green transition, it's necessary to ensure that women's voice is recognized. And this can be done by their active participation in development and implementation of, I would say, so-called green policies, because it's so broad term, and projects. Not only policies, but framing projects, also incentives. And we recognized two tools for doing this. It's participation and gender-responsive budgeting, something also that I saw in the materials you presented, Valbina, this morning. And for the end of this question, I would say that there is a lot of talking currently in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it's mostly in specific circles among CSOs and politicians, decision makers, and so on. But what we miss is the action in the field. Citizens need to feel the effects. The budgets need to be made to follow the policies. I think like 10 times we mentioned in the study, budgets needs to follow the policies, because without budget, and we will not have the good effects in the field.
Super, thank you, Alma. That quite complements what the previous speakers mentioned. This is very good, because it's also telling that we identified some bottlenecks. I will now give floor to the audience for the questions. I see there are questions already online. We can start with online questions, in fact, why not? Our audience online is as same important as the audience in the conference room. So, Valerie, please, could you tell us what is the question and to whom?
Yeah, we've received a couple questions online so far. I'll just ask them both, and I think it could be to any panelist that feels up to answering them. The first question is about social protection. So to what extent, from your perspectives, does the Just Transition emphasize the need to have in place adequate and comprehensive social protection to support, in particular, vulnerable populations, including those in the informal economy affected by the transition? So that's the first question on social protection. Another question we've received online is, in addition to the things that you've mentioned today relating what's being done for youth, gender balance, trade unions, what else is being done to explore the effects of the Just Transition in regards to other vulnerable populations, such as the elderly, Roma or Sinti populations, long-term sick, people who are differently abled? So the person would just like some information on those other aspects of vulnerable populations as well. So anyone who feels like responding to those would be great.
Okay, thank you so much, Valerie. Let's start with the first question on social protection, and let's do it as speedy dating. So let's try to focus in 1 minute really, or 30 even seconds, to reply straight to the point. Who would like to start? Andrea.
Yes, I can maybe start super quickly. I mean, absolutely, as I stressed, social protection systems are a fundamental part of the Just Transition process, strengthening social protection systems, and we're looking, for instance, also at Solidar at different schemes or like for instance, early retirement schemes for workers impacted by the green transition. So I also advise to go look at some of the material we have developed also on this matter. But absolutely, I mean, without strong social protection schemes, I think there's not going to be a just transition.
Super, thank you. Anyone would like to comment on this? No, not for the moment. On the second question, Alma is ready to answer. Please go ahead.
Regarding the other population, I had the opportunity to done capacity building training for the Roma network in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And at the end, we talked how to include them in this process, and it's by designing the policies. What we see in the field in Bosnia and Herzegovina, usually these incentives don't meet the needs of the one that need it the most. And I think it's because the policy development is so detached from the groups that will use these policies. Let's say it like that. For example, and it's not only, I would say, why I like to see this like a BO process, because, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, according to data of Ekoakcija Association, as many as 72.9% of households are heating only one room. So energy poverty in Bosnia and Herzegovina is really like a huge issue. But we need all of these other groups to be included in framing policies related to energy poverty, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alma. Annabelle?
Yes, thank you. And also thank you for the person posing this question, as it's a very important one, because we should not only look at one aspect, one social characteristic, but more, of course, that it can create quite a different picture. Maybe just shortly to say, as unfortunately I couldn't say everything in the Gender Equality Index of 2023, we also look at intersecting inequalities, such as age, educational attainment. Also, as I mentioned before, I think being born within the EU or not. So I also invite you to maybe read that chapter also specifically on energy. We launched yesterday, so it's online now. And also to say that indeed, if we want to look at different social characteristics that maybe intersect with each other in a certain way to create this this more vulnerable position or more marginalized, we, again, sorry to sound like a broken record, we need to have better indicators and we need to make them comparable and regularly updated. And also, and this is not EIGE's research itself, but it's quite an interesting thing maybe to continue on what Alma said. I think the European Environmental Bureau also published a study on Roma communities and environmental policy. So not our own research, which there's nothing wrong with also mentioning others. But it's quite an interesting, I think, piece if that's something that, if that's our topics that are, of course, very important, but also that you're interested in.
Thank you, Annabelle. That's very useful to know. You want to add?
Sorry, just to quickly
30 seconds.
I mean, very much in line with what was shared. There's a lot of also networks and organizations representing the interests of people in vulnerable situations, including at European level. I'm thinking, for instance, of the European Disability Forum that does a lot of great work on people with disabilities and the green transition, as well as the European Network Against Racism. So there are, of course, organizations representing the interests of minorities. There's the European Women's Lobby, of course. So I also encourage everyone to look at these European networks, as well as, of course, their national members and branches all over Europe. But I know that many also have members outside of Europe. And that's also why I think it's so important to make sure that there's a space for the organization representing the interests of people in vulnerable situations, marginalized communities, to participate in policy making and to have a significant role in political discussions.
Thank you, Andrea. I see some questions from the room, so maybe we can ask 2 more questions and then we will slowly wrap up. We finished we started a bit later, so we can finish 5 minutes over time, I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Please.
Yes, very quickly. Thank you, Balbina, for allowing me to participate here. I am Ricardo García Mira, professor of the University of A Coruña in Spain, and I have been participating in a recent project funded by the European Union about transformative social innovation. And one of the things that we have learned from there is for empowering vulnerable groups, we need to introduce some kind of change in the governance system. But when we talk about change in the government, changing the governance, we found a lot of resistances from the politicians and from policymakers in general. They are very reactive to talk about changes in the governments, and this is a problem. No? In our current project, we are trying to create spaces for involving people, involving organizations in the decision-making processes related to just transition. But we found that it's very difficult to find that the social innovation is really transformative, in the sense of producing something coming from these representatives of vulnerable groups. So how this is the question for the panel, how we can shield the social participation, introducing changes in the regulations that give support to this social participation of vulnerable groups and social innovation representatives, trying to put together or to approach the initiatives from the organizations with the initiatives from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. So the question on involving also policymakers and achieving this, that the social transformation happens at every level, that's a valid question, valid point. Do you have any ideas? Who would like to start? Alm, please.
Thank you for the comment and the question and sharing the experience. At least in Bosnia and Herzegovina, level of local self-government seems most open to, let's say, to work directly with the people. I don't know your political system and how participation is framed by the laws, but in Bosnia and Herzegovina, most of the policies regarding direct participation, decision-making is on the level of local self-governance. And when people are interested in the topic, they will participate. For example, 15 years ago, nobody knew anything about protection of the rivers, value of fresh water resources in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Anyone who would stand against the small hydropower plants was perceived as the enemy of the development of the country and so on. And by working constantly with people, by informing them, including them, even through non-formal participatory events, because government was closed, as you said, they are reluctant to changes in the way they operate. Administration it has its own life, I would say, and I do understand those people. I also cooperated with them, and they showed me what the processes look like from the inside. Like a lot of the work in the field and trying to, we were very creative in including the citizen voice in these processes. policies. There is no one solution, I would say. It needs to be tailored for the local communities that we are working with. Even in Bosnia and Herzegovina, you know, from one part to other of the country, you need to frame it differently. It depends with whom you are working with. So I know this is not like the answer, maybe more comment on your question, but thank you. This is something really, we need to work a lot on this, and I think like open table for a kind of negotiation is a good starting point to bring different people to the same table, I would say, for the start.
Thank you, Alma. So no, it's okay. It can be here. It's important to involve, but how to do it? How to do it, Andrea?
Yes, thank you. Lots of thoughts come to my mind here in this. First of all, starting with the fact that civil societies have always been the main advocates for systemic change, for really making sure that we are advancing not just with small fixes, but that we are also really putting in place new systems for a new economy, for a green economy, for a just transition. So I would start by talking about the involvement of civil society. And for me, I would say it's fundamental to have a structural civil dialogue. That would mean in the involvement of civil society organizations, of course, from all sectors, from the environmental and the climate sector, from the social sector, needs to be embedded in every step of policy making, from the design, but also, of course, in the implementation, in the monitoring of policies. And that also is linked with the topic of funding, because of course, you know, you also have to enable organizations, civil society organizations representing minorities, for instance, to be able to dedicate so much time and energy into participating significantly and structurally to the policy making steps. So this means that organizations also have to have the staffing, the money, the time to do that. So the conditions for civil society to be able to be involved in policy making need to be there. And I think this is particularly important also in the context of the Just Transition platform, looking at the Just Transition territorial plans, without going too much into it, but I think there are cases of territorial Just Transition plans that were developed together, for instance, with trade unions, civil society organizations, but we also know that there are some cases when this was not necessarily the case. So it's particularly important to make sure that there's a structural civil dialogue involvement of civil society. And I was also wanted to just raise a point on citizens' assemblies. Of course, civil society, civil dialogue, absolutely fundamental. And here I would also add social dialogue and the role of trade unions. But also just to mention the importance of participatory democracy, and for instance, how there are many examples all over Europe of citizen assemblies that are working out well. I know, for instance, in the last few months, there have been citizens assemblies here in Belgium by the Belgian Ministry ahead of the Belgian presidency of the Council of the EU on just transition. So these are good practices as well of involving citizens, but of course it needs to also be a meaningful involvement, meaning not just a tick box exercise of we've talked with citizens, we've talked with civil society, but as I said, structural embedding in the way policies and strategies or else are developed.
Thank you, Andrea, and I fully agree with you as regards the EU level support coming from the Just Transition platform. We are, of course, very much aware about the fact that stakeholder involvement is key. We have the JTP working groups created almost 3 years ago, and we will have a new group on equal opportunities launched at the beginning of 2024. We have also youth task force involved into this group, This has been also mentioned yesterday by the commissioner, our commissioner Elisa Ferreira, and this is the way how we also try to tackle this question of involvement of all levels, including other underrepresented groups and also regional level and civil society. So this is this part from our side. There are still some questions I see. Please go ahead here in the second row.
Hello, Eliza Barnea. I'm a Just Transition campaign coordinator for Bankwatch Romania. And I want to go back to that specific point in the first question, because there's a problem we see in Romania and probably in a lot of countries in East Central Europe with informal workers, which are a big part of the workers in these regions especially, and which are most often than not invisible in public policy, invisible in public funding programs, and which actually create an imbalance in the work market, because you have this paradox where employers have a deficit of workforce, but on the other side you have hundreds of thousands of people who are inactive. So I wanted to know from your experience, what are some measures that could help bring these people back into the formal economy, and how can the Just Transition Fund work for advancing this process? Thank you.
Any experience? Any experience in this field?
I mean, tough question, honestly. I don't think I'm able to propose concrete measures at the moment. I mean, you guys at CE Bankwatch do a fantastic job on, with all the relevant information and data that you gather and that you publish on these matters. I would just maybe raise the fact that indeed we don't often enough raise the point on informal workers, but also sometimes, I mean, thinking also of platform workers, they are maybe the ones also most impacted. I mean, they are outdoor workers, so they are impacted by, extreme weather conditions, for instance, and they're not necessarily part of the conversation around the just transition. But also we talked about the care sector. So I mean, just maybe to echo the fact that indeed I would also encourage maybe then the Commission and the Just Transition Platform to look into also these types of work that are not necessarily the ones that we're looking at or that are looked at the moment.
Thank you, Andrea. I noted down. Alma.
Thank you. I also had the opportunity to cooperate with Bankwatch. Really, you do a great job. Regarding your question, we mostly, with the study that I presented, we mostly looked at agriculture sector, because for Bosnia and Herzegovina it's very important when you see how much it is, how much we produce, and we try to propose some recommendations, like establishing thematic sub-programs for supporting women in rural areas. For example, it's mostly for the women, but it can be even to see what to do with the workers from the energy sector, and do they see them back in the rural areas, or what jobs do they need and how to provide those jobs. For example, tourism in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it has growth of 10%, like one of the rare for example, branches that he is working on, but still we face here also a lot of problems, no criteria, no women included, and so on. We propose to create an action plan for gender-aware policies in tourism sector, distribution of grants incentives, but this can similarly be done, for example, from the workers coming, or for the people that cannot for a long time find a job, or for the specific groups that you mentioned previously, Andrea. So I would say that there is a space, but still we miss budgets for all of these proposals that we made. Even I find out that even on the level of European Union, although your agriculture policy is something very strong and has a lot of interest of people in it, there are no these sub-programs for the women in rural areas still developed. So I would say that there is a space also in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We propose, because we have only around 3-4% of protected natural areas, and the European Union level is around 10%. We propose to make more of these protected areas, but at the start to include women in the managerial structures, so also to include them in ecological, organic, sustainable production, because food security is a big issue, and we didn't have time maybe to mention it today in the context of the green transition, but that is also something to look upon. So, short answer.
Thank you, Alma. And Annabelle, you would like to comment on this point as well?
Yeah, just shortly, and I must say I also can't really answer your question that specifically, but I just wanted to echo also this, that we know that there's research pointed to also the fact that these changes in the European climate, they will impact also the informal care that people have to provide, informal care work, and I mean more kind of, for example, as a result of rising temperatures, droughts, etc. These will impact the way we live our lives, the way the amount that informal care that has to be provided, which is shouldered mostly by women. So it's very important to keep that in mind when we talk about kind of the informal economic sector. To also realize, and it's very hard, of course, because it's by definition, as you said, invisible. So. But yeah, that's the only point that I wanted to add in that sense, that we need to be sensitive to these dynamics. Yeah, so sorry, no specific answer, but just a lot of musings and thoughts.
Thank you, Annabelle. Do we have any other question from the room? There are still some questions. Let's have maybe 2 more, and then we can wrap up.
Okay, hi. My name is Hannah Biro. I work as a policy advisor for Bellona Europa, environmental and climate NGO. Thank you for your presentations about these reports and research. It's very intriguing. I will be sure to look them up. I had the impression during your presentations that they mostly focus a lot on core regions and housing, energy poverty, mobility, and agriculture. But did you look into maybe these energy-intensive regions? I'm talking mostly about these industries, these harder-to-abate industries that cannot slowly rely on renewable energy to decarbonize.
So, did you look in your reports and studies?
Unfortunately, not specifically, and I have only some information that I cannot share now regarding this, because this is something that I hear from fellow researchers regarding this topic. But to be honest, with this research we didn't go into, because there was not a time, and it was framed differently, let's say, at least in my case.
Annabelle?
Yeah, maybe I can speak a bit to it. Just to clarify, the question was about if we looked at kind of parts of the energy sector that are not necessarily like renewable energy or, sorry, just to make sure.
I meant industrial production, harder to abate industries like cement, steel, chemicals.
Yeah, also from our side, we didn't look into that specifically, only with regards to some of these sectors that you mentioned with the labor force. So only that, but not necessarily the dynamics within. So kind of the same answer as Alma, sorry.
But we have the researchers with us today, and I think it's good to share ideas for future development of reports, because this may be helpful and this is needed on the ground, as we see from the question. And Andrea, you would like still to share?
Yeah, no, I mean, talking about our report, it was just a workshop report, a one-day workshop, not even, I think. So we weren't able to go into specific regions or sectors. We took more of a European broad look at what's happening in Europe. However, I would recommend checking out some of the material that organizations such as CEE, Central and Eastern Europe, Bankwatch Network produced on this matter, as well as the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, FEPS, have a lot of material developed on the energy-intensive regions and sectors. So just also to say, there's not just this report from a workshop, but there's a lot of material out there on this.
Yes, exactly. And owing that, we have under Just Transition platform, as I said before, developed the knowledge repository. It's available online, and there are plenty of materials already stored, and there will be much more coming in the next weeks, because our team of experts working for Just Transition platform develops a lot of toolkits and studies and reports on Just Transition. So please consult regularly this website, and I hope you will be able to find there some material that suits your needs. There was one more question, and we will wrap up, and then you deserve good coffee.
I will try to make it short. So I'm Javier Cañas from EIT Climate Geek, and I wanted to ask, very much related with what Andrea was saying, and also our colleagues from CA Language, about how to include some minority or vulnerable groups in the governance. First of all, I want to thank Balbina and the European Commission for creating these working groups, focus groups, task forces at the European level. I think that's very important to bring that into focus at the European level, so in the high, let's say in the high level of the discussion. But many times, like these people that we want to include in the conversation may not have may not have English in their skills, may not have access even to some IT tools so they could basically engage. Very likely they wouldn't have the financial possibility to come to Brussels, for example. And and even sometimes they may even not have even the time for doing that kind of activity. So this is very related to what Andrea was saying, how we can create structural processes that are embedded on governance, also at the local level, where everyone will be able to participate. I mean, there are many, as you were saying, it's a matter of time, but also it's a matter of money. Maybe some people would need to be, people representing these groups maybe need to be paid to actually work and to actually be integrated in these groups and bring, because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, time that probably they don't have because they are busy working or taking care of their families or struggling with many things. So my question is how we can do this on a local level so that communities that these discussions also happen at a local level and not only at the European level. And because that way also they can feel ownership. It's also closer to their debate if they are talking with people that are part of the same community, part of the same region, rather than people that are in another country with a different socioeconomic reality that may not relate to them. So my question is, how do you think we could I mean, for the whole panel, but especially maybe for Andrea and Balbina, how do you think this could happen?
Andrea, please, go ahead.
Sure, I can maybe start. I would say one of the things, as I already mentioned, is really having a strong civil society that really, civil society organizations are very often also the ones most in contact with people in vulnerable situations. They are the one, seeing them on a daily basis, thinking especially about the local ones. An NGO that focuses on homelessness, for instance, they are the ones who are maybe going out in a city or in a rural area to meet with people in such situations. So I think fostering as I said, there are good cases of participative democracy, but I think as well, having strong civil society organizations, and in a context in which we see a lot of shrinking civic space with lots of civil society organizations shutting down all over Europe, not just outside of Europe, dying because of lack of funding. I think it's particularly important to really make sure that there's a strong civil society also at local level that really has a voice, and that the voice is of course also heard by the local authorities, and of course also at all the different levels, and that, as you also said, there's a structural way of being involved in the decision-making process, so there is not just an afterthought, at some point let's go to the trade unions, or let's go to the civil society organization to see what they think about this, but let's involve everyone from the very beginning.
Thank you, Andrea. Alma, you can also complement if
Thank you for the question, and I do agree with these problems also that you said, coming to Brussels, language, and now I will also mention for citizens, it's bureaucratic language, because for 7 years I was following participatory events around Bosnia and Herzegovina and trying to see what doesn't work here and how to improve it. And I have a, let's say, a bit different proposal, although strong civil society is very important, but because of the problem that you mentioned, like a lot of them is closing up, especially NGOs that are reliable on the funds. When you work on project management, you don't have then time to go and, for example, to work with citizens and so on. And that's why, at least in this study, we propose to improve already existing participatory mechanisms for direct participation in decision-making, because in Bosnia and Herzegovina we have also tradition of participation from previous system, but also people still don't know how many mechanisms they have. And for example, sometimes it's between 5 to 10 different mechanisms, from consultative meetings to citizen initiatives or referendum. Problem is that they are not well defined, and that the local government usually is making these participatory events only when they are obliged for changing spatial plans, budgets, and sometimes when you are making certain laws. And then after people come to participatory events, they give their time, their knowledge, they give their comments, and after that, nobody is taking into account those comments. And this is where the problem lies. Because if the people see that their participation is bringing some kind of the effects, they will engage more. At least this is from the experience of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I know that we are a totally different political system than many of the other countries, but still this is also a good framework, at least as a researcher, to work and to see what works, what not. So I would say we need a more structuralized process, and we need within the government people, what you said, be paid for this, people who can drive these participatory processes and to go to help citizens to understand this bureaucratic language. I was, for example, writing a blog about council sessions of in Sarajevo, because I'm a political scientist. I know how to read those documents, but I was laughing because, wow, citizens will never understand what they are making decision on these sessions, so we need people within the government who will translate let's say, their position to citizens and then collect citizens' opinion and then translate it into either policies or I don't know, any kind or other kind of document that they are producing.
Thank you, Alma. And Annabelle?
Maybe very, very shortly, as our research didn't focus on specific regions, and also be mindful of the time, just to say that it's important to realize what specific barriers specific people face in participating. Talking from my own expertise and from my research as well, we see that care responsibilities and unequal division of care work can mean a burden on the time that women have also to perform other activities, such as participating in these processes. So that's very important, because we must realize, if we have just transition, who is making the decisions on all levels and who's contributing via, I don't know, labor market opportunities, and also who is who has the specific adverse effects, who's experiencing them of the just transition, but also of climate change at large. So it's important to think who's shaping this just transition.
And from my side, I will also thank you, Annabelle, that with Just Transition platform, of course, we try to be as inclusive as possible. For the JTP conferences, everyone can register. The sessions are web streamed. We have online participants from overall Europe. And we are going local with our technical assistance, and there are very many streams of this technical assistance. We organize capacity building in the regions, we involve local stakeholders, we organize events in the JTF territories to discuss concerns and the challenges and find some solutions, and to have this community building activities also on the ground. There are experts programs, exchanges of regions, JTP working groups, as you mentioned, that meet regularly in Brussels, and we support the members with travel costs and accommodation. So we try to be supportive on many different levels. And then we have also, of course, as I said before, the repository of knowledge that it's accessible for all, and also recently created Just Transition platform expert database that is also publicly available for you. You can consult it via our website, and it's for free, so you can use it. And this is all for the stakeholders in the JTF region. So we try our best, and there will be also last session of the day focus on the technical assistance on the ground that you can receive from JTP grant work in this regard, and we will see how this action to go local went, and if it was a success or not. Let's discuss it at the end of the day. So this being said, I would like to thank very much all of you and our speakers. Warm applause for them. And of course, if we want to have an inclusive, gender equal Europe, we should size it by ourselves, because this is in our hands. Thank you so much.